Hey there, creatives. I know I probably always say that I'm excited or delighted or really happy to welcome my next guest, and that's always true. Um, but I'm really, really, really excited to share this conversation with my colleague and friend, Angel Duncan. A number of years ago, when I was first starting out in private practice and I was working at a friend's group practice, um, Angel moved into the area. And, as a creative arts therapist, sometimes if you're not working around a program where there's lots of graduates, you're kind of like, all alone, just kind of figuring it out on your own. There's not a lot of community. And so my colleague was like, I met another art therapist at, it was like some networking meeting or something. And, and, and I was like, really? Well, I need to know who this person is. I need to meet them. Because I just, was hungry for that sense of connection with other professionals in the creative arts disciplines. And so Angel and I started communicating via email, and then we met, and it was an immediate connection. And we've been kind of collaborating, and we're friends ever since. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on the show was that Angel is really humble. She does so much, and yet, uh, again, like she's just so humble. Like even her bio that she had me read is like just a teensy weensy tiny smidge of all the things that she does and has accomplished. But one of the things I know that she does exquisitely well is she goes out into the community and does public speaking on the work of art therapy with her niche population, which happens to be neurocognitive issues, dementia, Alzheimer's, and other conditions. And I I have had the benefit of receiving a lot of referrals in my practice as a result of her work, and I just know that her approach could be highly successful for other people too. So even though she didn't necessarily have a private practice, in her job here, like she's always been working for another agency or something. And then as a result of these talks, people would want her to come out and do therapy groups or take on individual clients. And she's like, I just can't do all this work, so I just sent them to you. And that was, really beneficial for me when I was first starting out my business. Um, and it's not something that comes up in our conversation. So I wanted to make a point to share that with you, which is, really why I wanted to bring her on, because she's been really influential in helping me as I've navigated this process of building a private practice and writing and other things. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation and you have some ideas of how you might be able to use public community talks. They don't even have to be, really in depth. They can just be like 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it's this idea of getting the word out there that can really make a difference. So, anyway, I hope you enjoy.
The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative, focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm very excited to welcome my next guest, Angel Duncan. She is an art therapist and has an extensive background in counseling psychology, art therapy, and neurosciences clinical research. She's an adjunct professor at the University of Tampa, the executive arts director for the Cognitive Dynamics Foundation, and has a private consulting practice in brain health program development. She works with leading agencies in the US, UK, Europe, and Asia in neurological disease and mental health initiatives. She's a peer reviewer for Frontiers in Psychology and resides on the medical advisory board for Lorenzo's House, a nonprofit resource center based in Chicago for those living with young onset Alzheimer's disease. Thank you so much for being here, Angel.
Thank you, Raina. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
I'm so excited to have you. Obviously, there are some people that I have on the show and I really don't know them. I just know of their work and reach out to them and ask if they would be on the show. But in this instance, I've had the extreme pleasure of knowing you for a number of years and collaborating and working with you on a number of different projects. And so I'm really excited to share about all of the amazing things that you do with listeners. So thank you for being willing to do that.
Of course. Thank you.
So one of the things that Angel, since I've known her, has really been able to do is just constantly have a steady stream of potential clients or agencies or facilities reaching out to work with her. And I think that's because of what a great advocate you are. And can we talk a little bit about how you kind of got into the work of advocacy?
Sure. So it all started in the early 2000s in Northern California as a graduate student in art therapy, coupled with marriage and family therapy at Notre Dame de Namur University. And I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's disease or dementia or really, much in mental health on a professional level. And it wasn't until I got involved with Alzheimer's disease, working on my fieldwork hours at a facility with persons with dementia. And I was exposed to how art therapy really complemented this population. And then the Alzheimer's Association of Northern California, Northern Nevada chapter took me under their wing. And it was the most amazing experience I ever had. I think next to my education at the program, the graduate program, my real life experiences came from my work at UCSF in San Francisco and the Alzheimer's Association. And it's important, as an advocate, it's just you see and you're working with all walks of life. Mm-hmm. And how, especially in dementia and in mental health disorders, how these diseases and disorders really impacts them. Mm-hmm. And you kind of feel like these are vulnerable people that feel like they don't have a voice. Yeah. So it's almost like a responsibility to go out into the world and really communicate that, we're in this together. We're in this world together, and how we treat each other matters, and why we should care. And especially with advocacy and dementia, we all have a brain, I hope. And, and it's important that we're nurturing it and that we have an understanding of the importance of research and programs and what's out there and what's available in terms of resources.
Yeah, I think too, you're talking about like having a voice for them, but also I think you do a lot in collaborating with the family and like helping families understand what's happening with their loved ones, which is so important because that's so hard to witness.
Absolutely. Education is really, there's so much even, and I tend to forget, I've been in the field for 19 years and I still get asked, well, what is Alzheimer's disease?
Really?
I still get asked, or, I'll get a phone call saying, oh, thank God it's not Alzheimer's. The doctor said he had dementia. They
Oh,
don't understand
interesting.
they don't understand the differences between what is dementia, what is Alzheimer's. So it's, these basic things that I think are routine. I have to keep reminding myself there are so many people that don't know. And when families, oftentimes too, you have, a loved one gets diagnosed and you have a spouse or adult child that has no clue. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They just know that their loved one is not acting the same. They're not behaving the same way that they know them as. So it
Hmm.
really is working with families and advocating the importance of what resources and referrals are available, but also importantly, leading them to the appropriate resources and referrals because there's so much misinformation out there.
Mm.
So it's kind of trying to be that guiding light for families and the general public.
Hmm. Well, now that you're saying that, it makes me think, I bet that there are some therapists that might not know too, if that's not their population. What are some kind of symptoms that you would think would be important to refer to have further evaluation for if a therapist were to come across a client that they were having some concerns about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, repeating yourself, that's one of the most common ones where you're constantly repeating. You just get lost in conversation. Occasionally we have our space. I call them our hiccups, where we may space out in that moment and be like, "Wait, what?" You lose your track of thinking, but it's ongoing.
Hmm.
You're talking to someone in a session and you're noticing that they're not paying attention or they're getting lost, keeping up with the conversation, and it's happening more often than not. Of course, we have our good days and bad days, and there's so many things that can play a factor into memory. But repeating, getting lost. I've had therapists where they've had clients that see them every week, and all of a sudden they get a phone call and the client's lost. They
Aha.
couldn't get. They somehow took the wrong exit and they're lost, and they didn't find, they missed their session, their appointment. So, or you're missing late payments and bills, or if you have like a couples therapy, like me, being a marriage and family therapist, you have a couple where the person's saying they're not the same person anymore. Have that therapist ear and you pick up on things and be like, okay, let's backtrack. How
Mm.
is he or she, how is this person not the same? What changed? And you want to know, is it repeating? Is it forgetting losing keys, forgetting, getting lost more, not knowing how to cook? You're just constantly, it's these constant missteps and mishaps that are happening more often. Those are signs that could be something more, and it's time to get an evaluation.
Hmm.
And you want to know how long ago, when did this happen? When did you start noticing these changes?
Yeah, yeah, that's all really great information. And I know you had also mentioned it's really important to refer to, appropriate places. And obviously, listeners are listening from all over. What do you think the best way to find information for making an appropriate referral specifically to have these types of evaluations are for folks?
That's a great question. So like the Alzheimer's Association, they're national, they're international. Their website, www.alz.org, you can find out information under the sun in terms of referrals. They also have a 24-hour helpline number
Oh.
that you can reach, which I should have memorized in my memory, but now after working with them for so long, something like 800-272-39, something like 3900. I don't know. It's on their website. Go to www.alz.org. But they do have a 24-hour helpline number. They also have online support programming as well, a number of resources and places that you can go to. I would also recommend that families look at the Mayo Clinic, and they look at Harvard Memory Clinic. They look at the University of California, San Francisco, or Los Angeles memory clinics, because they're going to show, they have resources on their websites too. Their memory clinics also offer, what to look for, what are the resources and referrals available. But those were the places that I would recommend as
Wonderful.
good steps to take that are on a national level.
No, that's wonderful. That's really helpful for people that are in different areas. And, hopefully if with the Alzheimer's organization, obviously there are like local chapters all over. So that's really
Yeah.
helpful too.
Yeah, they do. And then even, there's so many other dementia resource centers outside of the Alzheimer's Association. Like, here we are in Fort Myers, we have the Dubin Center, but we also have the Alzheimer's Support Network in Naples, who does phenomenal work. They even have their own 24-hour hotline
Oh,
number
wow.
in Collier County. Yeah, they do phenomenal work. So, but each place typically has, I hope, their own, if it's not the Alzheimer's Association, they do have a dementia resource.
And so this is definitely your like niche population in your work. And obviously, part of what you've done over the years has been going out advocating, but also the education piece. How do you kind of get involved in organizing speaking engagements in the community? Because I know that you've done a lot of that, and for therapists that are just kind of starting off on their own and they're kind of wondering, well, how do I like help people to know that I'm here and this is what I do and this is how art therapy can help? Um, how do you go about getting these speaking engagements in the community? Because I know you do quite a bit.
Yeah, I do. Well, it kind of just fell on my lap first from my work at the Alzheimer's Association, because that was my job. I was the programs director and supervisor of the caregiver support groups. And then I led the art therapy session, Memories in the Making, and did tons of trainings. So I had to go out and educate. But, but that's it. But it's interesting because even though I had the job and my job was to go out and do that, there were places already. Here's your index cards of people you can reach out to. But I also had to take on my own initiative to research and research, find out who these people were. And it is a great way to get your foot in the door and educate about, even as an art therapist, this is what an art therapist is and how they differ from arts and crafts, and what I can do in a meaningful way. So it's reaching, typically I find reaching nonprofit organizations, whatever your specialty is in. So for myself, I'm going to reach out to the dementia resource centers, like the Alzheimer's Association, like the Alzheimer's Support Network. The Support Network does a ton of educational programs, and they have, from professionals in the community. So if there's a local resource center in the area that's nonprofit, I would encourage, a therapist to approach them and come up with a list. So when I come in, I'm prepared. I have kind of a PR kit. So I have a 1-sheet document briefly listing of what I can talk about. So here's the title, and then I just give a 1 or 2 sentences about what this presentation is. I keep it short, I keep it brief, because people don't have time. They're not going to sit there and read, pages of a description, but a general description of what you can bring to the table and offer as, this is what I can speak about. So the nonprofit companies are great. Hospital settings, they usually have an education area like this, that you can approach and talk to in terms of education or social work. I've done a lot with hospitals, and I've been able to navigate my way through working through a social worker at the hospital. They're the ones who are able to arrange those conversations about Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. Local libraries, especially, are huge in offering educational programs. So I did a lot of outreach to the libraries, to religious houses, synagogues, churches, reaching out to those environments. Those have been great, as well as parks and recreation.
Mm.
They offer people to come in and give presentations on what's happening in the community. So those are the types of people. The YMCA's, especially, they have their senior their senior program, and the AARP chapters, the Kiwanis Club. Those are the types of organizations that really want to know about brain health, and they want to know about dementia. So those are the types of people I reach out to with the list. And then the second, then the first thing you hear is, well, how much are you charging? Because most
Mm.
of these places don't have a budget. If you're working if you're working in an organization, that's great because it's usually covered in that salary. But as a first-time person starting out, typically I didn't charge anything as
Mm.
somebody new and just starting out in the field. This is what I can offer, because it's what the hope is, that you're getting your foot in the door. They like what you have to say, and the next thing you know, you want to get contracted, and this is
Mm.
what you can do. So now it's like, after 19 years, and you pick and choose what you can do, if it's pro bono or offering, but then you can come up with a sliding scale fee, to give talks. So, and that's at everybody's discretion. Each person's different on if they feel they want to charge a fee or not for speaking. But those are the types of places that, at least in my field, who I've reached out to and how I've gone about it. I've shown up in person, because I find that going in person is, you're having face to face with somebody, and
Yeah.
it's you make that connection. Yeah, it's a lot of driving, but you can do that. And phone call, you can email and phone call, leave messages. Emails, it's half and half. And I think we all know most of the time emails are going to get ignored, or
Yeah.
you get a polite email like, come back, we're really busy right now, try me in a month, you kind of thing. So that's why I find either making a direct phone call or showing up in person have been better ways to reach out locally.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think people get overwhelmed in their inbox, and it just becomes so time consuming to respond to each email that you almost have to prioritize of like, well, what do I have to get to? Who do I have to respond to? Even though you might want to respond to everybody in there, it doesn't always happen. I know, like, I'm guilty of that myself. I always feel bad, and people like, I've emailed a couple of times, and I'm like, oh, yes, you have. I'm
I
so
know, and I know it's
sorry.
not intentional. It just, I know it happens, or it may go to spam. You don't know. So that's why I feel making a direct, like I needed to reach the Alzheimer's Association in Clearwater, and
Hmm.
I sent an email, nowhere, it went nowhere. I
Mm,
made a phone call, left a message. At least within 3 days, I got a call back. So
gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think depending upon like the age bracket too of individuals, some people are more responsive to phone calls than others. I know some people don't like making phone calls for whatever reason.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I know it's a fine line. Like, do you feel like a telemarketer, or trying to get me in or not? But yeah, but I do think it's how you go about it. How's your attitude? How do if you don't want to be too over the top, zealous, bubbly, you know, but you don't want to be like, sound like you're on a suicide hotline number. It's just a professional manner and how you present yourself. I think that is what can be that hook as well.
mhm, mhm. What would you say is probably like the most responsive of the topics which you do speak about when you go out in the community? Um, what I guess what I'm trying to ask is if folks are really thinking about, okay, if I want to put a presentation together to go out in the community to talk about art therapy and to talk about how it really can benefit the population that I'm working with, like, how long do you usually give a presentation for? Is it like 30 minutes, 45 minutes? How much scientific research are you interjecting in there? Like, what's your kind of approach to that to make sure that, the audience that you're reaching in the community, one, understands your expertise, but
Mhm.
also they actually understand what you're talking about. Sometimes I think, we can get too jargony or whatnot.
It's true. Absolutely. I'll start talking about, oh, here's a florbetapir PET scan and send her, you got to get a CSF sample under a fluoroscopy. And people are like, what are you talking? Yeah. It's like, you can see the deer in the headlights. But you definitely hit the hell on the head. It's that, you want to talk about things that that's your specialty, that
Mm-hmm.
if somebody says, oh, can you talk about, for me, can you talk about heart disease? I can't, sure, and then I'm going on Google and trying to find everything I can to put something together. I'm not an expert in it, and it's, to me, that it's misleading. So I think it's important that you focus on what you're good at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What can you do? What can you talk about? What is that specialty? And piecing that together and being creative in the way that you do have your talks, like mindfulness, I know can be very complementary to art therapy. So I have a talk on mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And that mindfulness talk, I talk about art therapy and how it complements it. So I do an overview of mindfulness. What is it? What does it mean? How is that useful in life, in the body, in the brain? And then what are some art therapy techniques that help in
Mm.
that moment? So you kind of mix it up, like, okay, here's mindfulness and art therapy, or you can just do an introduction to art therapy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a common one I get asked a lot, is an introduction. But then how much do you want to give away?
Mm.
These people are not art therapists. So it's not like, you may have an artist coming that's interested, and then they take what you have to say. And the next thing you know, they're working at the facility down the street as an art therapist, per se.
Ooh.
That has happened. It's like, you have to be careful that you're giving enough information that's enticing and informative, but you don't want to give it all away in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. So it's educating to enough, and talks, generate typically and you got to look at your audience, like if I'm speaking at, I'm going to speaking at a conference at Eli Lilly, and I know these are all scientists in there, and I know I can talk my scientific jargon and they're going to understand.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm giving this talk to a lay caregivers group at, an Alzheimer's support network group, you really have to, as the CEO, President Clark Pollard says, you have to dumb it down. You have to speak layman's terms. You can't speak in this Greek, you got to speak it, speak in the native language. So you want to keep it basic, especially if, that your audience is a general public. Even if you are giving a talk, say you're giving a talk at an assisted living facility on art therapy, and you're assuming that the activity director or the CNAs know about the disease, or they should know about art therapy. Chances are they don't. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really, it's educating them how this differs from arts and crafts, how this differs from other activities that they may be offering. And presentations, I will ask how long. Typically an hour is good, and that includes Q&A.
Okay.
You want people to you want to sustain their attention. And I find that if you start really, going on like hour and a half, you can start losing people. So some talks I will be told I have only 30-45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So in that 30-40 minutes, I really have to condense what I'm giving. I just want to give the key points. And then the Q&A. I did do a talk where I was asked to give a talk at I think it was the Kiwanis Club, and I had literally 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's not much
Yeah.
time at all.
No. And there have been times, and there have been other organizations where it was the same thing. They just wanted me to come give a brief, 10-minute talk. So 10-20-minute talk. So sometimes that gets caught in the moment. So I have a whole presentation that's an hour long, and next thing I know, I only get 20 minutes. So I'm going to highlight just the slides that I know I can be in that time frame, and then be sure to answer Q&A. And that's why it's important that what you're talking about is your specialty, because I can guarantee you're going to get questions that you're going to need to know and be able to answer articulately. If you don't know, then it's and it's okay to say. Like for myself, I get sometimes I'll get questions that are really related to a physician or a
Mm.
nutritionist. If I'm talking about lifestyles and I'll get a nutrition question, I will say, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a physician, but this is what I do know. And I'll offer, what I do know, but I make that distinction that I'm not, an MD.
Sure. Sure. Which sometimes that can be confusing. People want to call you a doctor as a therapist for some reason. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's a different thing altogether. But yeah, it definitely, we have to be, very educated on what we do, but we're not a doctor.
Yeah, but it's just making those distinctions.
Mhm.
And even in a tech term, sometimes too, it's a lot of times I've gone to facilities or libraries where they didn't have their tech equipment.
Oh, so you
They did,
just,
yeah, so you just talk. But so that's a question I have learned over the years to ask. Do you have a laptop and a projector available? Or a
mhm,
wall or a screen to project on. That's become a routine for me because there's too many times where I've shown up and they did not have those things, and it was just assumed that they did. So as you're going out and speaking, you have your PowerPoint and flash drive. You just want to make sure, just on the, you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, that these things are available. If not, you need to bring in your own.
yeah. No, that's really great advice. Really great advice. And I know earlier we were talking about how, here in Florida, you kind of started because of the jobs that you were working at, which allowed you to go out and do all of these community-based teachings, and that started to allow you to build kind of a side practice for groups. But you also mentioned that before you were here and you were living in New Jersey, you actually were very intentional about how you created a program by going out to agencies. Can you share a little bit of like what the similarities or differences were in terms of like the PR kit that you were talking about?
Yeah. So when I was in New Jersey, I worked for a home care company. So I would encourage, if some of your listeners are out there, are art therapists, and you're looking to get into this field, partnering with a home care company, I think, could be a really good thing to do, because there's so many out there and they all tend to do the same type of services. So it stands you out.
Hmm.
So you're contracting an art therapist, and it's surprising to me how many home care companies do not employ expressive arts therapists. And it really could be to their benefit to do that. So I had the good fortune of working for a home care company who did think creatively and out of the box. So here I was as their educator marketing person, going out and educating and marketing and, pinpointing the region. And I was in an area that I did not know at all. I'm new to New Jersey. I didn't, I'm still relying on my GPS for everything. And I'm having to strategically pick out, the libraries, the churches, the hospitals, the synagogues, the different elder departments and parks and recs department, all those things. And then I sat down with the owners and said, I think we could do a lot with art therapy that would really not only enhance, the care that we're giving to clients, but even open it up to other agencies. And they thought,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. So we came up with a deal. So I worked full time for them, but then we kind of had a deal with the art therapy. They allowed me to go into the facilities, and they took a portion of what I did. It was kind of like acting as an agent. They took a
Hmm.
portion of what I made. So what I did was I came up with that same kind of document, but I had kind of like a kit where I got in actual samples of artwork that I did have permission to use. Of course, no names or anything identifying names were on it, and was able to use, just, highlighted about 2 or 3 cases that I worked with, and came up with a paper that was a simple article that I was able to find on how art therapists benefit facility, dementia care.
Hmm.
So I came in prepared with articles about, how we're beneficial, how this helps, what I can bring to the table. And then I would meet with different skilled nursing facilities, independent and assisted living, and dementia. The people that you really should target are the marketing directors,
Oh,
because
but
the marketing directors at the facility, their job is to bring clients into the facility. So they're looking for creative ways on how they can stand out more. What are
mm,
facilities offering that, what can we offer that other people are not offering? So that's
gotcha.
so the marketing people have been the most interested, is what in my findings. So I would sit down with the marketing person. I would share my articles with them. I would show them examples, like here's a case study of a woman I worked with in California, and she was very depressed, but look, and then after working, this is her artwork that she did, and this is what she said about it. And immediately they're sold. They see, and they can firsthand see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then they introduce me to the activity director, and they say, and it's funny because I've had some where they don't say to them or ask them, they tell them, we're hiring her, she's coming in. So, and in some cases it has been the activity director that I did meet with, and those are the great ones because their activity directors are looking.
Mm-hmm.
They are looking for meaningful activities.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and an engagement. So I'm, and I do have to say, you cannot compete with bingo. So whenever, that's something I've learned in 19 years, do not schedule your art therapy sessions on the same day as bingo, because you will lose. So.
That is so funny.
It's true. They love their bingo, but
The
yeah, but they're
dopamine reward center is like really
exactly, they
getting
got
a
their
lot of
reward.
activation.
They are. So I've learned I cannot compete with bingo. So, but meeting with the marketing director and the activity or life enrichment director has been, those two people are the key people. And it's good to have the marketing behind your back because they're working very closely with the executive director. And that's who arranges for the budget. Because that's the first thing you're going to hear from an activity director is, I don't have a budget.
And
That's
so
the first thing.
how do we
you're gonna hear.
address that?
So you don't have, speaking of advocacy, I go on a rant. I'm like, the activity director next to the director of nurses is the most important person in that facility because they are the lifeline to that resident's happiness. You need to pay them well, and you need to have a budget to bring meaningful activities into their facility and actually give some quality of life to your residents, because this is their home. So yeah, I have a big issue with budgets and stinginess. But when you do work, when I talk with the executive director or I talk the marketing or activity, they will try to underball it. I'll give them, I'll tell them a fee, and then they want to completely not even, they want to go half, if not less than half of what you presented. And that's an issue. So, if you're a registered therapist or even working towards your supervision and this is your practice, then, it is a mutual kind of respect. Mm-hmm. So, you have qualifications and training and education that they don't have. Sure. And I will have these conversations, with the executive director or the marketing person and be like, well, this is my fee. Yes, I have met people halfway. We have met in the middle somewhere. I'm not excessive in what I think I ask, but I also will emphasize that I bring my own art supplies. Mm-hmm. Because the majority of the time, the facilities are going to use crayons and childlike materials.
Yeah.
So I try to use dignifying materials when I'm when I'm working with seniors. And when I tell them that I bring my own art supplies and I'm coming here, once a week, I try to offer weekly. So some facilities may contract you weekly or every other week. Mm-hmm. Some may just want you to come once a month. So, which I think weekly is by far the most beneficial, but really helping to educate and talking, you do want to have these meetings where you sit down and you have an understanding about, I'm bringing my own supplies. They are dignified. This is what I'm doing. This is my training and expertise. And this is what, this is why I think it's worth, why this is worth that. Mm-hmm. And when I did present that, even in New Jersey, I was in different counties, different areas, and not necessarily high income areas either. It was a range of different mixes. And I ended up getting 12 clients. I was at 12 different facilities.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It got to the point where I was realizing, oh my God, what did I do? Because I'm still trying to get into my work for the home care company. So, who were very gracious and generous, but it ended up being a really nice complementary relationship between myself, the home care company, because they also used me and they paid me well as an art therapist to go into a client's home and work one-to-one, doing an art therapy session with one of their clients.
Well, that's a really, I think in addition to thinking about going out and selling yourself to an actual facility, building a relationship with a home care company as a resource when they do see clients that could really benefit, and if you're willing to go out to their home. That's a great idea.
Absolutely. And then even working with families, I worked with a woman who she ended up having young onset and was very
Mm,
angry and in denial. And her husband came to the home care company and was like, I don't know what to do. And so they were like, how would she do with art? She was very opposed in the beginning. I would just come over and talk, but eventually we got to sit at the kitchen table and I created with her because it made her
mhm,
weird. It made her feel conscious to sit there and have me watching her create. So we would just kind of paint together. And I was 1-to-1 with her. But then you also worked with the family. She
mhm.
had 2 adult children. Well, one was going into high school, one was graduating college. So
Wow.
I would have family meetings as well.
Yeah.
And even here in Florida, I've gone into different homes and have worked with clients in homes as well as with their family members doing art therapy sessions.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So if somebody were to like want to approach a home care company like that, in that, would they still reach out to the person in the marketing space of the home company, the marketing director of the home company?
The clients or the art therapists?
The art therapist. So if the art therapist wanted to build a relationship.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So home care companies are typically, a lot of them are mostly franchises. So they're owned.
Okay.
So usually they have an owner. Um, from my experiences, it's usually a family operated franchise where it's a husband and wife or siblings. But usually it's a franchise. If not, they're independent, but they typically have their own owners. So what I would suggest is, and there's so many of them, but you also want to look at, who has the good, who has good reviews, who's doing, who's going above and beyond. And you also want to look at home care companies because most of them are private pay where they can't afford to to contract an art therapist. And then you have some that are insurance only, Medicare,
Okay.
Medicaid, they can't pay. I mean, that's the
Oh,
reality. Fortunately, that's
right.
the reality. Unless you're willing to, and of course I don't want to deter anybody from working in that because those are the people that probably need it the most. Um, but you just something to think about in the back of your mind,
Hmm.
Medicare, Medicaid versus private pay, so you probably, if as a therapist if you want, this is what you want to go into in a private practice and being contracted, you may need to come up with a sliding scale fee
Hmm. Hmm.
depending on what, who it is you're working with. But they're usually smaller in operations. You may only have like 5 people that work in the office.
Okay. I didn't
So
realize
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So like right at home instead, senior helpers, that's who I worked for. Sheraton Caregivers, they're in Westport, Connecticut. They're the only home care company that I know that exists that actually hires full-time art therapists.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Most of them,
wonderful.
yeah, most of them graduated from Albertus Magnus program and got hired on with them. And I just think that's amazing. I was so impressed with everything that they do and their client services. I personally feel like they're a role model for home care companies because of the work that they do, not just in art therapy, but just the work that they do and who they employ. But yeah, but calling up one of the, home care company and just identifying yourself, I'm an art therapist and this is, I'm interested to see if you would be interested in working together and trying to arrange a meeting.
Awesome. No, that's really great advice. And I think for folks that are looking to build a practice where they don't have to have the brick and mortar themselves, and it's such a great option because you really can have a robust practice with contract work alone.
You can, absolutely. I do want to mention that, for an art therapist going into the field, you may get a home care company or a facility that wants you to sign a contract. Make sure that that contract
Mm.
does not exclude you because you may have some that absolutely do not want you working for another home care company. They do not want you contracted with another facility.
Oh, okay. So
So
no,
those are,
non-compete. type
Yes, yes,
clauses?
yes. So I don't see that very often, but it has come up. So if this is your job and this is what you're looking to do, unless they're willing to hire you full time and, or employ you, those are things that you want to negotiate in that contract. So make sure you go through, if they do have you sign a contract, with which most do, make
Hmm.
sure you go through that with a fine tooth comb, and you may want to even seek some legal advice
No, I think
for private practice.
that's really great advice, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
dealt with my fair share of strange contracts over the years.
yeah, we both have.
Yeah. So it's good to have somebody to review them and say, yeah, this language is a little bit strange, and it doesn't behoove you to sign this contract if they're not willing to negotiate and
Yeah.
redraft it.
Yeah, when you're looking at contracts, you want to make sure that it's a mutual benefit, because most of the time it's leaning towards, their side. So you want to make sure that it has in there how much is being agreed for payment, when you're going to be paid, and, just making sure, like, does it say you can't compete with anybody else? Or, if you terminate your contract, does it say that you can't work for another competitor for a year afterwards? I mean, that's the stuff you got to look for.
Yeah, yeah, because that would be counterproductive if you were trying to create a practice out of, the
Absolutely.
contract work. Um,
Yes, and I unfortunately have seen those with other people in the field. So it's just things that as we're talking, that I'm remembering, like, look for.
And that wouldn't, it makes me think too, like it's one thing if you're working for a company full time and you're salaried and they're paying all your benefits, et cetera. But if you're just going in once a week to offer a single group, that is over the line. It's definitely overstepping, and I think it maybe borders on being illegal because it prevents somebody from actually working in their occupation, and that is one of the things that is not supposed to happen in a non-compete clause, from what I've understood from the lawyers that I've talked to.
Yeah,
Um, but it doesn't stop people from trying.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing things that are out there. So it's just important to that, you're just smart about it, and, looking at it very carefully.
Hmm. For therapists that are interested in really developing a private practice around this niche, do you have any words of advice that you would bestow upon them?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's good news and bad news, is that, it's becoming a more and more high demand field population. The bad
Hmm.
news is more people are being diagnosed with the type of dementia, but it also is creating more opportunity for an art therapist to come in and do some really good work. So I would just say to, really scope out it's a team effort,
Hmm.
and especially in private practice, it is hard, and to maintain client and sustainability. So
Hmm.
I would encourage, as for a private practice setting, being contracted can be quite lucrative. It can be a really good thing. You're setting your own hours. You can work within the flexibility of time. But, I would align yourselves with a home care company. I think actually that's one of the best things you can do, because more people are wanting to age in place,
Oh,
and to
yeah.
be at home. And as an art therapist, really come up with your toolkit, come up with your little PR kit. Don't make it too overwhelming, because people aren't going to read it. Just create bullet points of how you are beneficial and why you are needed, because you are
Hmm.
needed. You're very needed. And there's research, I mean, even at getting some of the research articles showing exactly how an art therapist and creativity stimulates neural activity.
Hmm.
You're not curing the disease, but you are increasing quality of life. You're lessening psychotropic drug usage. You're, you're improving mood and behavior. there's so many factors that you bring to the table. So by just bullet pointing that and aligning yourselves with home care companies, with care facilities, those are the two agencies I would say would be your best bet in terms of contract work.
Awesome.
But that's what I would recommend. That's what I personally would recommend going to, and what I've used for myself, and what I've mentored my graduate students in their work.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. If listeners want to find out more about you, more about your work, which I have to say, when we read your bio, it's really, really small. It's only like a fraction of all of the things that you do and have done and accomplished. Where can they find out more about you, Angel?
Thank you. I can be reached at my university email would be the best. It's a Duncan, DUNCAN at UT as in Tom at .edu.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes.
A Duncan at ut.edu. That would be the best way to reach me. And you can also look at the Cognitive Dynamics Foundation website. And I'm also accessible through our foundation's website.
Okay.
And that's cognitivedynamics.org.
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom. And I hope that other therapists that are starting off and getting their feet wet in private practice find it inspiring to know that you can build a practice without even intending to build a practice.
Absolutely.
Just through educating and being an advocate. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. I won't say much on this outro because I said so much on the intro, but I really hope that you appreciate this conversation with Angel. And if you ever have the opportunity to listen to her speak on the topic of art therapy and neurodegenerative diseases, I highly recommend it. She's really brilliant and highly knowledgeable, and also I think just really inspirational. At least I find her to be. I think you will too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.